Let's Teletalk is a CAPS program for Cal Maritime students. It's a drop-in informal consultation service for 10 to 15 minutes with a counselor. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. There may be a wait of 5 to 10 minutes. This spring 2021 semester, Teletalk is available from 12 to 12:45 Tuesdays and Fridays. Go to www.csu.edu/caps for more information.
Alrighty, hi everyone. I'm with Angelica and Dr. Wallace here, and today we're going to be answering some of the questions that were sent to us. We have quite a bit to talk about, and Dr. Wallace being here is definitely going to add a lot of insight and um, experience that would definitely be helpful to answering the questions we got for you so far. Dr. Wallace, do you mind giving us like a quick 30-second what you do, where you're from, where you're coming from?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. Dr. Ian Wallace, counseling psychologist, licensed psychologist in California, 8th year here at Cal Maritime. Used to be the only mental health counselor here at Cal Maritime. Now I'm part of CAPS, and we've got 3 separate counselors. I've worked at other counseling centers. As I mentioned, we were talking in the intro about Fresno City College, UC Berkeley for a year, Virginia Commonwealth. I'm originally from New Jersey, but live here in the Bay.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. How about you, Angelica? Just your grade, major, and then also, yeah, pretty much that's it.
Okay, well, I'm a peer health educator. I'm a global studies major with a minor in law, and this is my last semester here at Cal Maritime.
Cool. Same here. Same here. So why don't we just jump into it, because we do have a couple questions that would definitely going to take up the time we have. Um, as you know, like you guys, this especially me and Angelica, this is our final semester, and we can say that our college experience at the beginning of what we did maybe 3 years ago is vastly different to what we're experiencing right now. And a lot of the things that we're going through, we probably couldn't even thought of even last year, or even half a year ago. Now everything's online. It's a whole different vibe, whole different setup we got going on for students. Um, and I can tell you, you know, I'm working, doing an internship, taking classes, and I get overwhelmed sometimes, maybe even multiple times a day. And the first question we got is what are some of the grounding techniques we have when we're feeling overwhelmed? And um, I can start off by saying, when I'm overwhelmed, I definitely need to take a break. Uh, and it maybe that doesn't necessarily mean like procrastinating for like an hour, but I definitely need to step back away um, from the moment. When I was a civil air patrol cadet before all this, and one of the things we learned was, especially when I was going through these pararescue orientation courses, was that if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a knee or do an about face, which is do a 180 turn around, take a knee and drink water. Basically, just getting yourself out of the moment, and that can be just for like 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 30 seconds. Um, that's from my experience. Like taking that break if I'm ever feeling overwhelmed. And I know with school, and the whole coronavirus situation, we're constantly being bombarded with news. It definitely does feel overwhelming sometimes. Angelica, Dr. Wallace, do you have anything to add to that?
Go ahead, Angelica. I'm happy to chime in, but please go first.
I feel the same way. I know a lot of people have a lot of different difficulties at home. It used to just be school, but now we're home, we're all working, we all have to balance schedules that we didn't have on campus. And overwhelming situations are coming up more than what they used to. Like for me, I just try to take a step back. I'm like, it is what it is, and just get through it.
Okay. I can add a couple of things. I think one of the things with dealing with feeling overwhelmed is really having the awareness, the self awareness about when you're overwhelmed. Sometimes being overwhelmed can come on quickly, but more times than not, it's more gradual and it builds and accumulates, kind of like the pandemic and the stress and everything else has over the course of this time. So knowing yourself and recognizing kind of when you start to feel overwhelmed, it'll be much easier to control it versus being just entirely overwhelmed and shocked or panicked, etc. So that's the first thing. Just personally for me, sometimes when I get irritable or short or I stop listening well, those are some of the signs that I'm starting to get stressed or overwhelmed. And so I know that, and sometimes I'll need to create some type of habit, ritual, or intervention. So, like just like you mentioned, Justin, the about face, I love that. Like, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be literally almost anything that interrupts the process of being overwhelmed, that cascade. So anything that interrupts is an intervention. And the more you can create a habit of it, the better. So some of the more common ones include a deep breath, taking a break, like literally leaving the room, for instance, of this where the situation is happening, or even just kind of a mentally kind of like recentering yourself and some self-talk, some positive things like, okay, no, what's the focus here? Where am I right now? What's happening? And certainly those are harder if it's a re-traumatization situation, if it's a significant trauma. But for most situations, having some type of ritual or habit to kind of catch yourself, um, I would recommend. And then ultimately, social support, checking in with others is another that you don't need to rely on yourself, but you can say, hey, I'm feeling this way, and a verbal expression can be really therapeutic too.
Yeah, and definitely going off of like what you said about the support. I know it's difficult, especially right now when we're not on campus. We can't see our friends that we usually would hang out with or people we say hi with going to class. But the campus in clubs are still going on, and I'm just throwing this out there as kind of like just real quick advertisement that there are still groups and organizations that you can join as like students right now if you're still wishing to make those connections before everything and the pandemic's over and we're able to go back to class. That way you're set up, hopefully by next semester, whenever this is over, to have that social support. That way, if you are overwhelmed, that you have something to fall back on and good people to help you push through.
Absolutely. Agree. It's really important to kind of establish those connections and networks so that they can prevent or manage the overwhelmed feelings when they come up.
So the next question we have, I personally, fortunately, haven't had to deal with this, and so I'm definitely gonna probably throw this on you, Dr. Wallace. Is what can you say to a friend who's displaying suicidal cues? And so personally, I've been fortunate. My friend group, we're very positive, and I've been fortunate with finding good people that are able to, we're able to back each other up. Where none of us really feel that way, or at least none of us display that way. So, Dr. Wallace, can you? I have no experience and definitely don't really know how to say this because I'm not an expert in this area. What can you? What is the best way to answer this question? Like, I guess not just what you can say, but what can you do?
Sure. Right. No, it's a good question, and I appreciate you tossing it my way. I'm happy to respond. There are a couple key things, and I'll just try to simplify it. But it is what you say and what you do. So what you can say in those very moments when you notice somebody, and it sounds like this question is coming like you see a friend, somebody you have an existing relationship with who you know pretty well. And so use the information that you observe first and foremost to describe what it is you see. And so when you're confronting or you're addressing a friend who you're concerned about, you want to be descriptive in what you see. Hey, you're not yourself. You look withdrawn. It sounds like or it looks like you're doing things that you may feel hopeless or worthless, or whatever it is that you put words to the observations you have and reflect those to your friend or to that person you're concerned about in a sensitive and caring manner that attempts to understand and explore what they're going through. So again, the key thing is to describe the observations and start there in a caring manner. That is validating and acknowledging and is help in and of itself. So that's one thing. The second thing is if you truly feel that someone is suicidal or having thoughts of killing themselves, the research shows that if you can, asking that question directly is better than beating around the bush or asking it indirectly. And so not always, it's easier said than done, but if you can, asking someone, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you thinking about killing yourself? Will get you information that is more accurate. And this question is not just for mental health professionals. This is for, everyday people, who just have those concerns when they come up. Because once you get an answer to that question, then you can proceed. If the person's currently actively suicidal and they have a weapon, you're probably going to want to call police. If the person is not and they tell you that they're okay, but they've been having these thoughts, which is more times likely to be the case, you're going to want to say, look, I care about you. Let's make sure you get some help. And more times than not, that's a connection to a professional counselor like myself or someone in the counseling center here is usually the easiest way to go. Making an appointment, we're located in the health center. There's drop-in appointments every day that are available. There's lots of ways to connect. The CAPS website on the Cal Maritime site, easily searchable, is available too. So in a nutshell, that's my quick response to describe your observations, validate, acknowledge, and then refer for professional help.
So I just wanted to go back to the point because, especially someone for me who's never had to deal with that, I would have never thought like I would have thought maybe if like, this is without any experience that if I was encountering a friend that was having suicidal thoughts that I wouldn't try to be so direct with them about that because I would assume that that would probably push them over the edge or they might feel embarrassed. But you actually saying that direct intervention is probably is definitely the best way forward. And that's what the research shows. That's definitely like, I would have thought of that. But, going back to the point of having those, that fallback of people and having those resources, definitely, I would say, I would hope that I could be the person that would intervene in that. And I guess if I was asking that question, it asks like, what can you say? Definitely, are you thinking about killing yourself? But I think before that, being able to having the will to intervene first off is probably, I would think, the most important part, because if you aren't having the will to intervene, then what you're going to say is not going to happen.
And if I can add, I like those thoughts. And yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And everybody's not going to be able to necessarily do that based on comfort or experience or the nature of the relationship. But other things that are also helpful include instilling a sense of hope. So saying it gets better, for instance, that there's hope, there's help available. I'm in this with you. We're in this together. We'll find a way forward. Any kind of message of reassurance and hope also makes a huge difference when somebody is going through some type of despair or suicidal thoughts.
Angelica, do you have anything to add about what maybe you should say or what you should do if someone is experiencing suicidal thoughts? Just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it. Me and Dr. Wallace are kind of just talking about intervening and being direct with the question.
First off, I believe that students need to be aware of the situation before it becomes a severe situation. So, through trainings and being aware of signs and just things around them before it gets worse.
Insert a comment there. I appreciate the honesty there, and the truth of the matter is that oftentimes this is the problem with mental health being stigmatized, that we don't talk about things, we're reluctant, don't have the skills or language in order to kind of intervene sooner, like you said, before the situation becomes a situation. And so that's where that direct approach, where that was emphasizing, kind of connects or is valuable. But again, it does take practice and does take support from others too.
So the next question we have is, and I could definitely answer this. What are some healthy coping mechanisms to combat anxiety? So when I was in high school, I was a Civil Air Patrol cadet. For anyone that doesn't know it, it's the Air Force Auxiliary Program. It's great for people who need some discipline in life and people who are looking for opportunities in the military, getting those flight hours. Or I myself was a California search and rescue volunteer, participated in 2 non-distress and 1 actual search and rescue mission. And let me tell you, that actual search and rescue mission, we were up in Sacramento looking for a down pilot that had gone down just, I guess, south of Lake Tahoe. And the 2 anxieties that I felt were, I wanted to be part of the ground team that was going out there to look for them, but my job was to stay at mission base and handle communications and make sure that the sheriff's teams and the FEMA teams that are out there searching for these down pilots had the communication with the Sacramento airport. That way they can coordinate it. So the anxiety of actually, I guess, in a way of wanting to go out there, kind of wanting to be in the action, that killed me. And like, I unfortunately didn't get to go out. I handled the communications and all the comms networks, and um, but the way I coped with that, and well, looking back, I could say the way I should have coped with that is definitely being in the now and knowing where my place is at that moment within the grand scheme of things. And my place wasn't to go out there and act and be on the ground and search for those people. My place was to make sure the people that were searching for those down pilots was to make sure they had good communication with Sacramento Airport. That way, the planes that were taking off to look for them um, knew where they were. And so, definitely dealing with anxiety is focusing on what you're doing now, right at that moment. Um, Going back to the first question of being overwhelmed, it's like if you start thinking too big, you know, it's going to be overwhelming, and this guy's going to give you anxiety, and you're going to feel like you can't do it. So definitely having that kind of 5 meter targets, like, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be in this now moment. Um, Looking back, that's probably what I should have done, and what I will probably should work on and continue to do. Dr. Wallace and Angelica, anything to add to that?
I can I can chime in. No, no. Okay. Just in brief, I think there's some fundamental things, just daily healthy habits that are really important to keep in mind that research shows reduce anxiety. So having a regular sleep schedule as best you can as a college student, I know that's really challenging, especially Cal Maritime, watch and other responsibilities, but the more regular it can be, the better. 7 to 8 hours will make a big difference compared to 5 or 6. Um, and that just maintain and physical exercise, just some type of physical exercise, cardiovascular, 3 days a week. Just these basic guidelines make a big difference towards your overall general anxiety management. So whatever interventions you try to manage, like you were mentioned, Justin, in the moment, will be aided by a fun foundation of those health habits. Secondly, I like the present focus. To add to that, I think it's also helpful to have a specific task or role. Oftentimes, there can be like in a speech class, right? When you're giving a speech, performance anxiety, one of the techniques I often give in those speech classes here at Cal Maritime is to have a specific task and focus. Like, what is the goal? What is the aim? To be very prepared and narrow. And sometimes that can help you or be grounded versus getting distracted by your heart racing and other types of anxiety reactions. And then lastly, the internal kind of self-talk or reassurance or validation. Like, no, I'm going to be okay. I'm good at this. I'm capable. I've prepared well. Whatever type of positive, reassuring inner voice, just as a technique, can be helpful as well. But go ahead and add to that, Angela. I'm sure there are other things.
My coping mechanisms for anxiety are to just take a step back and relax, eliminate myself if possible from the situation that's giving me anxiety, and just taking time for myself to calm down and take a break because it could be very overwhelming. Just in general self care.
So the next question we have is, what are some ways I can help feel more positive during the day? Um, I mean, that's kind of a big question for me, at least, because generally what I try to do to feel more positive is drink a cup of coffee in the morning. That usually makes me feel a lot better to go through my day. Uh, but I guess self reassurance that, like, and making a list. And what I know for a fact, if I make a list and I complete the things on that list, I feel a lot better going to sleep. And then I feel better starting my next day that I completed something yesterday. I can do it again. Just got to build off of it.
Okay, so I stay positive during the day by rewarding myself. Any little thing, I make sure to do something that I love. Like, for example, if I'm doing homework, I'll reward myself, like, oh, I could watch TV or I could spend time with family. So just be positive and try not to overthink the little negative things. Like, oh, it is what it is, and just try to make the best out of it.
Yeah. And then let me add an interpersonal factor that the research shows that literally happiness, the number one factor, if any, to increasing happiness has to do with positive, rewarding social relationships. Friends, family, even faculty or staff or others. if you have relationships that are rewarding and meaningful, satisfying, that is really a huge factor. Let me also plug a couple like podcasts and a website that might be of interest. So there's two podcasts that actually literally talk about the science of happiness. One of them is called The Science of Happiness. The other one, and that comes out of a lab at UC Berkeley or affiliated, which has a accompanying website called The Greater Good in UC Berkeley. And then there's another podcast called The Happiness Lab, which is a psychologist out of Yale who has a laboratory of where she does research on increasing happiness. And I think it's weekly or every couple of weeks they post episodes on these, and they talk about some recent paper or factor that goes into happiness. So another place to get your daily dose, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I guess going back to the whole coffee and caffeine part, I would say if I have a cup of coffee in the morning, I'm probably a lot more easier to work with and definitely be able to form those relationships a little better. Just a little tangent. So the next question we have, and I'm actually going to move around a question. One is going to be pertaining towards, I guess, people looking for their future career. So this is a question I really like. This next question is, what might progress with my mental health look like? And Dr. Wallace, I'm definitely going to have you answer this question. Um, can you, I guess, and I guess for someone who's going through with mental issues, progress to them might look like having a better outlook on life. If I had to guess right, I mean, Dr. Wallace, do you have anything? Definitely jump on this.
Sure. I'm happy to. Let me kind of categorize it in two general ways. One measure of like improved mental health would be the reduction of distress or negative symptoms or problems. So, for instance, someone who's experiencing significant anxiety, progress would look like I need less anxiety. I want to be less anxious, fewer worries. You know, somebody who's experiencing depressive symptoms, sadness, crying, hopelessness, I want less of that. Like, and if I'm not as distressed, not as, sad or tearful or moody, that would be progress. Same thing with substance use. If someone's got a substance use issue or an eating disorder, kind of getting those things under control. Now, simultaneously, it's important to also look at what's called flourishing or a strength based approach. So I want to improve things in my life, not just take away the negatives. So, for instance, I want to improve the quality of my relationships, like we were talking about before. I want to feel closer to people, connected. I want to be more open and honest with others. Maybe I want to improve my motivation. Maybe that's in the classroom. Maybe that's in my career as an student athlete. Maybe I want to improve my concentration and attention. So there are two ways to look at it: removing the negatives or boosting the positives. But Angelica, take it from there. I'm sure there are things on your mind too that maybe are related to this or different.
Progress is different for everyone, but the most important thing to do is pinpoint what is causing your mental health and figuring out from there what can I do to change this and taking baby steps each and every day to try to make progress. You need to have a plan first and try to figure out what's causing it to be able to fix it or have progress.
I guess like the little victories add up to larger victories when it comes down to it.
Good point. Self awareness, that starts with self awareness. And just getting self aware and seeing things more clearly is a gain in and of itself. That's an important point too. Absolutely. Not losing sight of like incremental change, just getting started. Small steps lead to big steps. Small changes can make big differences. These are lots of things that I'll say in counseling over and over, and they really ring true. So, no, great points, both of you.
And so this next question, I guess, kind of ties into someone who's gone through that progress of bettering their mental health. And so, does counseling impact any license tract or military officer programs when they're going through that application process? And I would assume since everything's confidential, um, I'm not sure how best to answer this. But Dr. Wallace, again, please enlighten us.
Sure. No, the good points. The confidentiality and the concern about any impact on licensure or military service. So the short answer, does counseling impact that? The answer is no. Counseling itself absolutely does not impact it. In terms of the confidentiality piece, oftentimes the applications do have mental health history sections that will ask about any type of treatment. And so oftentimes there will be specific questions about counseling or psychotherapy. And coming to counseling does lead to having to endorse in an honest way, yes, to those questions. But answering yes, at most, just coming to counseling would say elaborating and sometimes providing a letter about when you went and things like that. Here at Cal Maritime, in my the way I operate is I don't diagnose unless absolutely necessary, and that way the diagnosis is not part of what you have to report. And that's common not just here but elsewhere. So that's another way to protect. Um, Let me also flip the question and say, so what does potentially impact? What mental health history or concerns do pose a challenge potentially? And I can say that substance use, particularly if there's legal involvement or academic problems related to like code of conduct violations for substance use, those can pose obstacles. If there is a hospitalization for psychiatric reasons, whether it's based on suicidal ideation or something else, psychiatric hospitalization can be a barrier. And then certain medications, although many times there's a waiver, especially with a Coast Guard license, there are waivers for many medications. So, so in a nutshell, again, counseling, no. Rare other factors can be barriers, but more times than not, there are waivers and pathways, even with those psychiatric histories.
And even too, like officer tracks and license tracks, they also have their own process um, that I guess that you would have to go through. That would definitely check off the boxes of, I guess, any incidences or anything that might affect whatever future career you might have on that track.
Well said. And let me just add here that sometimes I will meet with students on a regular basis to provide evidence of stability. So, for instance, say somebody comes into Cal Maritime with a history of having been a psychiatric hospitalization or a DUI, and coming to counseling and having ultimately at the application process, having a counselor write a supportive letter of stability can often aid the application when there is a history. So coming to counseling can actually not just hinder, but actually bolster in some cases.
So I guess just tying back, if counseling won't affect, but for any students that are going on right now, I guess it'd be safe to say if you do feel any mental health issues or anything you want to bring up, definitely go through counseling. That way, in the future when you do apply, um, you can be at least vouched for, or those issues are definitely being taken care of, or you're taking care of them, and it's showing that you're being proactive and bettering your future. That way, you can get to your goal. If you want to get to your goal, you definitely have to go through the process to make you ready to achieve it.
Yeah. And this might be a good time just to remind folks that 1 in 5 students are come to see a CAPS counselor every year. And by the point of graduation, almost 1 in 2 students have met with a CAPS counselor. So it's a very common experience. And I'll also say that if you have further questions about this, the teletalk that I offer on Tuesdays and Fridays from 12 to 12:45 is technically not official counseling, but it's a consultation. So if you have further questions, that's a great time to kind of pop in and just kind of chat with me, and it doesn't count technically as counseling. And information is on the CAPS website about teletalk.
So the last question we have is, how can you increase student involvement in CAPS? I'm guessing from my point of view, the internship I'm doing with the resiliency program is, I guess, the best way I'm getting involved in, I guess, all this. Um, Angelica, do you want to talk about your other side about what you're doing?
Personally, I'm a peer health educator and I've partnered with Andrea through CAPS. And I've also referred a lot of students to CAPS, but a lot of them say, oh, I don't want to go. I don't feel like it's confidential enough, or they don't feel secure in being able to go talk, and a lot of them are
Mhm.
afraid, like the previous question about the military and license track. So how could you increase student enrollment?
Sure. No, that's a good question. One is just visibility. On our small campus, it's important that myself, Andrea, and Mira Elwell, our new part-time counselor, just are visible. I think that was part of my success here in the beginning years was just kind of being present, going into the classroom, meeting with student groups, being present for academic senate, or just being around and involved as much as possible, and humanize that I'm just a normal person. I mean, I was first forced, when I was young, I was forced to go to a counselor when my parents divorced, and I wasn't so pleased. And so I didn't start off on a good foot with thinking counseling was a thing to do. And many students that I meet with have similar experiences. So I understand some of the reluctance for various reasons. And so part of it is just coming across as a normal person who's informed, who can be helpful. And then beyond that, reassuring people, again, like I mentioned before, with statistics, it's a normal thing. All students come, male students, female students, white students, black students, Latinx students, native students, Asian students, like across the board, LGBTQ plus students, seniors, freshmen, and just kind of reiterating that it's a common experience that crosses, these identities is another aspect that I like to emphasize. And then just combating any myths that it's going to prevent you from getting licensed, that, administrators are going to have access to your counseling records, or whatever fears people have that underlie their reluctance. I think addressing those is important too.
So thank you again, Dr. Wallace and Angelica. These questions were definitely a lot to unpack and unload. And, I guess summarizing it down is um, definitely if positive mindset, little victories make bigger victories, and being more inclusive and asking questions about counseling and being self-aware to actually go to counseling is definitely the main points that I got from all this.
I just wanted to say thank you for coming on and having this conversation with us. It was really needed on campus.
You're very welcome. I really appreciate the invite, and I enjoyed hearing both of your perspectives too and the suggestions. So I hope everybody who's watching can glean